These seats are for passengers who belong here. The flight attendant, Bradley, declared, his voice cutting through first class. He saw a young black woman who was out of place, not Zara Johnson, the 27-year-old CEO who had built this very airline from a single plane. As he banished her to an economy seat, Bradley felt a smug satisfaction. He was oblivious to the fact that he had just humiliated his own boss. He thought he was enforcing an unspoken rule. In reality, he had just handed his CEO all the evidence she needed to expose a corporate conspiracy. Now let's dive into how an ordinary flight became a battle for dignity that would change an entire airline forever. Zara Johnson slumped into the economy seat, ignoring the curious stars from other passengers. Her mind raced back to a journey that had led to this moment. Only 27 years old, she had built Horizon Airways from a dream into a billion-dollar enterprise. Her fingers absently traced the crack in her grandmother's photo frame. The only thing she had left of the woman who believed in her enough to leave her $10,000 inheritance money. Money that Zara had used to start her company while still in college, defying every venture capitalist who had laughed at the ambitious aerospace engineering student from the wrong side of town. Her parents had sacrificed everything for her education, working multiple jobs, moving to a tiny apartment near the prestigious tech university where Zara had earned scholarship after scholarship. The plane hit turbulence, jolting her back to the present. Bradley Wilson, the senior flight attendant who had humiliated her, now strutted through the cabin, fawning over white passengers while barely acknowledging others. Zara watched him carefully. At 45, with perfectly styled hair and a practiced smile, he carried himself with the confidence of someone with powerful connections. She had heard rumors about his friendship with board members, but had dismissed them as office politics. Now she wondered. Elaine Whitfield, the elderly woman who had demanded Zara's seat, reclined in first class sipping champagne that Bradley had rushed to provide. Our most valued passenger deserves the best. His voice carried back to economy. The same voice that had cut through Zara like a knife earlier. These seats are for passengers who belong here. The implication still stung. Zara had shown her. Ticket pointed out her seat assignment. Bradley had examined it with exaggerated skepticism. There must be some mistake, he had insisted. Other crew members gathered, all automatically assuming she was in the wrong. When she politely stood her ground, Bradley's tone hardened. If you continue causing a disturbance, I'll have security remove you from this flight. The memory of what happened next burned in her mind. Security personnel surrounding her. The humiliating public pat down the thorough search of her bag. Her personal items displayed for curious onlookers, and worst of all, her grandmother's photo. The one taken on the day she had told Zara to fly higher than they say you can, falling to the floor as Bradley carelessly rummaged through her belongings. Only Thomas Reynolds, the chief of security, had shown a flicker of recognition in his eyes when he finally saw her face. She had subtly shaken her head, a silent command he understood immediately. Zara had built her empire while deliberately maintaining a low profile, regularly traveling incognito on her own airline to monitor service firsthand. Today's experience had certainly been enlightening, though not in the way she had intended. Would you like a beverage, a different flight? Attendant now stood beside her, tone professional, but cold. Just water, please, Zara replied, pulling out her tablet. She began documenting everything while details remained fresh. Names times exact phrases used. This wasn't about one uncomfortable flight or one damaged photo. This was about a systemic problem that she would address methodically, thoroughly, not by simply firing Bradley Wilson, satisfying as that might be, but by examining how such behavior had been allowed to flourish on her airline. The flight seemed interminable. Zara reviewed contracts she'd secured during her international trip. Expansion deals that would grow Horizon Airways into new markets across 3 continents. Deals she had personally negotiated despite pushback from certain board members who felt her youth and background made her ill-suited for international business. The irony wasn't lost on her that these same board members would be celebrating these contracts within hours, unaware that the CEO they occasionally patronized had just been banished to economy CL class on her own airline. As the plane began its descent, Zara mentally prepared for what came next. She wouldn't reveal herself immediately. Sometimes the most effective justice required careful planning rather than impulsive action. Bradley Wilson and Elaine Whitfield would eventually learn who she was, but only after she understood exactly how deep this problem ran in her company. The wheels touched down with a jolt. Passengers around her gathered their belongings, eager to deplane. Zara remained seated watching as Bradley personally escorted Elaine from the aircraft, carrying her bags and promising to have a car waiting. Only when they had disappeared did Zara finally stand straightening her simple blazer and collecting her damaged belongings. "Miss." Thomas Reynolds approached cautiously, other passengers flowing around them. "I'm deeply sorry about earlier. If there's anything I can do, there will be." Zara responded quietly, "But not here, not now." As she strode through the terminal, Zara's phone buzzed with messages from Marcus Chen, her loyal COO who had helped build Horizon from the beginning. Board members asking about Japan deal. Richard making noise again. "Need you ASAP." Zara quickened. Her pace. The discrimination she had faced today was inexcusable. But something in Marcus's message suggested bigger problems awaited at headquarters. She just didn't know yet how interconnected these issues would prove to be. Horizon Airways headquarters dominated the skyline, its sleek glass tower reflecting clouds and sunlight. Zara entered through a private entrance, avoiding the main lobby where she might be recognized. In her early days, when pushing investors to take a chance on a young black woman with big ideas, anonymity had been a liability. Now, as CEO of one of the fastest-growing airlines in the industry, selective anonymity had become a strategic advantage. Most employees had never seen her in person, a deliberate choice that allowed her to experience her airline as customers did. The executive floor was quiet when Zara arrived. She paused before a wall of photographs showing Horizon's journey from a single leased plane to its current fleet of 60 aircraft. She remembered painting the logo herself on that first plane, climbing the ladder despite her fear of heights, determined that every detail would reflect her vision. How many venture capitalists had shown her the door, one memorably suggesting she'd try something more suitable like hair products? How many banks had rejected her business plan before she finally secured that first critical loan? Marcus Chen waited in her office, pacing anxiously. At 42, he had been Zara's first hire, believing in her vision when few others did. "Thank God you're back," he said, relief evident as the door closed behind her. "Things have been happening while you were gone." Concerning things, Zara placed her damaged carry-on bag on her desk. "I just experienced some concerning things myself on our airline." Marcus raised an eyebrow, but continued urgently. "Look at this first." He handed her a tablet displaying customer complaint data. Notice anything? Zara scrolled through the reports, a pattern emerging that made her stomach tighten. Complaints from minority passengers had increased 30% in the month she'd been traveling. More disturbing, the resolution rate for these complaints had dropped dramatically. Who authorized these changes in complaint procedures? Zara demanded. "That's just it," Marcus replied. "Richard Harrington has been making operational changes claiming temporary authority while you were handling international negotiations. He's implemented a new passenger comfort policy that gives crew discretion to move passengers based on what they're calling compatibility concerns." Richard Harrington, Vice President of Operations, 58 years old. Old school aviation had opposed Zara's appointment as CEO from the beginning. She had kept him on for his industry connections, a decision she now questioned. "There's more," Marcus said grimly, pulling up another document. "I found this accidentally. Richard has been in talks with Global Air. I think he's trying to orchestrate a sale." Zara stared at the screen, reading the exchanges between Richard and Walter Sterling, CEO of Global Air, a competitor notorious for its terrible diversity record and multiple discrimination lawsuits. The messages discussed streamlining leadership and returning to traditional aviation values after acquisition. "When did this start?" Zara asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "I'm not sure, but it accelerated while you were away." "And Zara, I tried accessing some of our security protocols yesterday and discovered your clearance has been restricted in certain systems." Zara reached for her phone. "I'm calling an emergency board meeting." "That's another problem." Marcus said Richard has already scheduled what he's calling an emergency vote for tomorrow, and this came through legal an hour ago. He handed her another document. Zara skimmed it, her blood running cold. A legal maneuver had temporarily frozen her controlling shares pending a competency review. Without those shares, she could be outvoted tomorrow. "The security team?" she asked, partially replaced last week. "New hires with connections to Global Air." Zara sat heavily in her chair, mind racing. "This isn't coincidence. The flight attendant who forced me to move today, Bradley Wilson. He's connected to board members. I need to know which ones." Marcus looked confused. "What happened on your flight?" Zara briefly recounted her experience, watching Marcus's expression shift from confusion to horror. "We need to move quickly," she said. "Finally. Contact everyone we absolutely trust. Small group, different departments. We meet off-site in 2 hours." As Marcus hurried out, Zara stared at her grandmother's cracked photo. "They have no idea who they're dealing with." She whispered to the image of the woman who had taught her to fight. "So, let me ask you this. What would you do if someone tried to steal everything you'd built through years of hard work? Would you walk away or fight with everything you have?" Comment number 1, if you'd stand your ground like Zara, or number 2, if you'd look for a compromise. And while you're sharing your thoughts, don't forget to hit that like button if you believe in standing up against discrimination in all its forms. Subscribe now to see how Zara uncovers an even darker conspiracy within her own company than she could have imagined. Will she discover who's really pulling the strings before tomorrow's crucial vote? And just how far are her enemies willing to go to take what she's built? The coffee shop 3 blocks from headquarters had become their impromptu war room. Zara surveyed the small group gathered around the large corner table. People she trusted implicitly. Carmen Rodriguez, head of maintenance operations. Her decades of experience evident in the calluses on her hands and the no-nonsense gleam in her eyes. Darius Washington, IT specialist, whose genius with systems had helped Horizon stay one step ahead of competitors. Aisha Afor, a brilliant attorney who had chosen Horizon over prestigious law firms because she believed in Zara's vision of an airline that treated everyone with dignity. "We need to understand the full scope of what we're dealing with," Zara said quietly, mindful of other patrons. "Not just Richard's power play, but how deep discrimination has penetrated our operations." "I've been pulling data," Darius said, opening his laptop. "There's a new program in our booking system called Compatibility Algorithm. On the surface, it's supposed to group passengers with similar preferences. But look what happens when I run test scenarios." The group leaned in as Darius demonstrated. Profiles with traditionally Black or Hispanic names were consistently flagged for additional compatibility screening and more likely to be reassigned seats away from white passengers with premium status. This wasn't authorized by any legitimate channel. Zara said, anger evident in her voice. "It gets worse," Carmen added. "There's been new training materials distributed to cabin crews." She pulled out a glossy manual. It's all coded language. Prioritizing passenger comfort is explained with examples that all involve moving minorities away from white passengers who might feel uncomfortable. Aisha examined the manual, attorney's eyes catching important details. This creates legal exposure on multiple fronts, but what's most concerning is how it was implemented without triggering any of our compliance reviews. Because Richard bypassed them, Zara said, Marcus discovered he's been creating shadow approval chains. Carmen hesitated before speaking again. "I have something else you need to hear." She pulled out her phone hit play on a recording. Richard Harrington's voice filled their corner. Thankfully, not loud enough to reach other tables. "Once we transition to Global Air, we can finally drop this diversity charade." Richard was saying, Sterling understands how to run a proper airline. First class should feel exclusive, not like some social experiment. Some passengers just don't create the right atmosphere. You understand. Zara's face remained impassive, though her hands tightened around her coffee cup. When was this recorded 3 days ago? Executive lounge. I was doing maintenance on the climate system, and they didn't notice me. Darius spoke next. I've been tracking Bradley Wilson's communications. He's placed at least 7 friends in key positions throughout the company in the last month. All with Richard's approval, all bypassing normal hiring protocols. I've been reviewing complaint records, Aisha added. I found numerous cases of minority passengers filing discrimination complaints that were summarily dismissed. The new system automatically categorizes these as passenger misunderstanding without investigation. Zara nodded grimly. And what about Global Air and Walter Sterling? Darius pulled up another screen. Sterling has a history. 3 discrimination lawsuits at his previous company, all settled quietly. And Global Air's executive team is remarkably homogeneous for 2025. Richard plans to replace our entire leadership structure after the sale, Carmen revealed. I overheard him telling Bradley that the diversity experiment would be ending, but there's something else that concerns me even more. She lowered her voice further. My team is being pressured to sign off on maintenance records that aren't up to our standards. When I questioned it, my access to certain hangars was restricted. A server approached their table. Conversation immediately shifted to casual topics until they were alone again. We have 24 hours until the board meeting. Zara said, we need irrefutable evidence that can't be dismissed, and we need to regain control of my shares. Darius suddenly stiffened eyes on his laptop. Someone's trying to access my secure server right now. They're looking for the same files I've been showing you. Can they trace your location? Zara asked sharply. Not directly, but Darius typed rapidly. They're good. Really good. We should assume company communications are compromised. At that moment, Zara's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Security team asking questions about your location. Be careful. We need to move, Zara said quietly. Separate exits, different destinations, burner phones only. Darius, secure what you found. Carmen, get any recordings somewhere safe. Aisha, start preparing legal countermeasures. Anything to delay tomorrow's vote. As they prepared to leave, a man in a dark suit entered the coffee shop, scanning the room with too much interest. Zara recognized him as one of the new security personnel. Carmen, create a distraction, Zara whispered. Without hesitation, Carmen stood stumbling dramatically into a waiter carrying drinks. The resulting crash and commotion allowed the others to slip away unnoticed. Outside, they quickly dispersed in different directions. Zara caught a glimpse of Darius nearly being intercepted by another security guard before he ducked into a crowded store. Her heart pounded as she realized how quickly their opposition was moving. This wasn't just corporate maneuvering anymore. The stakes had escalated dangerously. As rain began to fall, Zara pulled her collar up and disappeared into the city crowds, mind already formulating their next move. 24 hours to save everything she had built. 24 hours to expose a conspiracy that ran deeper than she had imagined. The odds seemed impossible, but impossible odds had never stopped her before. Pre-dawn light filtered through the windows of the small apartment Zara kept under, an alias for rare occasions when she needed complete privacy. She hadn't slept. None of them had. Their improvised command center consisted of laptops, takeout containers, and determination. I've restored your system access, Darius announced, fingers flying across his keyboard. Used a backdoor I created when we first built the security architecture. They don't know I'm in. What's our status? Zara asked, studying the building schematics Aisha had spread across the dining table. I filed emergency motions challenging the share freeze, Aisha replied. Judge Wilson is reviewing them this morning. He's fair. Not in Richard's pocket as far as I know. Carmen's team has secured the maintenance records, Richard tried to alter Marcus added. He had joined them after midnight, bringing crucial files from his own secure storage. Zara nodded. Time for our first move. Direct confrontation with Bradley Wilson. Not to win him over, but to gather evidence and assess what we're dealing with. An hour later, Zara sat in a small conference room at headquarters while Darius monitored security cameras from a van outside. Bradley Wilson entered, his confident swagger faltering slightly when he saw who awaited him. "Miss Johnson?" he said, recovering quickly. "What an unexpected pleasure." "Sit down, Mr. Wilson," Zara replied coldly, sliding a tablet across the table. "I'd like your explanation for this incident." Bradley watched the security footage of himself, forcing Zara from her first-class seat, his expression cycling through shock recognition and finally calculation. "A terrible misunderstanding," he said smoothly. "I was simply following our new passenger compatibility protocols. Had I known who you were, had you known I owned the airline, you would have treated me with respect." Zara finished. "That's precisely the problem. Miss Johnson, I sincerely apologize. I was just following the new policies. I never would have." "These policies," Zara interrupted, displaying the training materials Carmen had provided. "Who authorized them?" Bradley hesitated, clearly weighing his options. "They came through proper channels. Richard Harrington personally assured us they had executive approval." "My approval?" he implied that. "Yes." Zara leaned forward. "Mr. Wilson, I'm offering you one opportunity to choose the right side of this situation. What exactly is Richard planning?" Bradley's composure cracked. "Look, I just do my job. Richard mentioned change is coming. Promotions for people who understand the company's true direction. I don't know details about any global air deal, if that's what you're asking." Interesting slip, Zara thought. She hadn't mentioned global air. The door opened and Janet Morris, HR Director, entered with another tablet. "You asked for the complete data, Miss Johnson." Janet, a recent hirer Zara hadn't been certain about, had responded to Marcus's careful outreach with surprising alarm about the changes in company policy. Now she displayed undecured data showing the negative impact of the new compatibility procedures, minority passengers systematically displaced, complaints ignored, troubling patterns in crew assignments. "I'm issuing an immediate policy reversal," Zara stated, sending the command from her tablet. "All compatibility procedures are suspended. A company-wide message will go out in 5 minutes." Bradley's phone buzzed immediately. He glanced at it, paling slightly. "That would be Richard," Zara observed. "You should answer. Tell him exactly what's happening." Bradley stepped out to take the call. When he returned, his confidence had been restored. "Richard would like to meet with you. He says there's been a misunderstanding about the board meeting tomorrow." Zara agreed to the meeting, sensing an opportunity to confront her primary adversary. Richard Harrington occupied a corner office that Zara noted was larger than her own. His silver hair and tailored suit projected authority, but his smile failed to reach his eyes. "Zara, welcome back," he greeted her with false warmth. "I hope your international trip was productive." "Extremely," she replied coolly. "Almost as productive as you've been in my absence." Richard's smile tightened. "I've simply been maintaining operations. Perhaps there have been some miscommunications about new procedures. Miscommunications like secretly negotiating to sell my airline to Global Air." A flicker of genuine surprise crossed Richard's face before he recovered. "I've had exploratory conversations with several potential partners. That's part of my job. Nothing has been decided without board approval and tomorrow's emergency vote. Simply a quarterly review that needed rescheduling. Nothing to concern yourself with." They both knew he was lying, but Richard maintained his facade of reasonableness, even agreeing to postpone certain agenda items. When Zara pressed, she left feeling cautiously optimistic, immediately issuing directives to reinstate proper complaint procedures and security protocols. By evening, Zara had met with department heads, clarified her authority, and seemingly regained control. The mock company-wide email reaffirming Horizon's commitment to equality had generated supportive responses from employees worldwide. Judge Wilson had expedited her petition with a hearing scheduled for the following morning. "I think we've contained the immediate threat," Marcus said, as their core team regrouped at Zara's apartment. Richard backed down too easily, but at least we have breathing room. Those words would come back to haunt them. 3 hours later, when Darius, returning to his car after retrieving additional equipment, was attacked in the parking garage by 3 men. Their precision suggested professional training, their target very specific, the hard drives Darius was carrying. At the hospital, Darius managed to whisper to Zara through swollen lips. They knew exactly what I had. Someone inside is feeding them information. Almost simultaneously, Carmen called in a panic. The maintenance reports I secured have been altered retroactively in the system. Someone with higher access than mine has been busy. Janet Morris reported her office had been ransacked. Key evidence missing. And when Zara finally returned to her apartment after midnight, she found her security system disabled and a single message spray painted on her bedroom wall. Know your place. Her phone buzzed with increasingly disturbing news. Anonymous threatening calls to team members' families. Richard suddenly unreachable, scheduling an off-site board meeting at a location known only to select participants. Most alarming, Aisha reported that the judge assigned to their emergency hearing had been replaced by Judge Harrison Blackwood, known to have connections to Richard's country club. They're moving faster and hitting harder than we anticipated, Marcus said, voice tight with worry. They've extended the share freeze through illegal technicality. And there's a private security team surrounding headquarters, restricting access to certain floors. Zara stared at her grandmother's damaged photo, now the only thing she had managed to save from her violated apartment. Their brief victory had been an illusion. Richard had merely retreated to gather strength and strike more decisively. They had underestimated his connections' resources and, most of all, his ruthlessness. We need a new strategy, she said finally. If they've escalated to physical violence and intimidation, we need to change our approach entirely. None of them slept that night, working feverishly to counter a threat that had suddenly become far more dangerous than a simple corporate takeover. Zara's phone jolted her awake at 5:30 a.m. It was Marcus, his voice tight with urgency. Turn on the news, any channel. She fumbled for the remote, clicking on the television mounted on the wall of their temporary safe house. The headline scrolling across the bottom of the screen made her stomach drop. Internal conflict at Horizon Airways. CEO under investigation. The morning anchor's voice was measured but sensationalist. Breaking this morning, sources report that Horizon Airways CEO Zara Johnson is under investigation for financial irregularities and mismanagement. The airline's board has called an emergency meeting amid allegations of improper conduct. The screen cut to Richard Harrington looking appropriately concerned in a carefully staged interview. This is a difficult time for Horizon Airways. As Vice President of Operations, my priority is maintaining our service to customers. While the board addresses these serious concerns about leadership, they're moving fast, Zara muttered, already scrolling through news websites on her tablet. The story was everywhere, with carefully constructed quotes from anonymous sources painting her as unstable, incompetent, and possibly criminal. Her phone buzzed with a text from Aisha. Check social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all flooded with what appeared to be a coordinated campaign targeting her reputation. Doctored photos showed her in compromising situations. Fake accounts claiming to be former employees detailed abusive behavior that had never occurred. Most disturbing was a viral video of Elaine Whitfield, the woman from the plane, tearfully describing how Zara had threatened and intimidated her during the flight. This is a professional hit job, Marcus said when he arrived 30 minutes later. Someone spent serious money making this happen overnight. Someone like a crisis management firm, Aisha added, joining them with fresh coffee and grim determination. Richard has connections to Blackstone Strategic Communications. They specialize in character assassination. The morning brought worse news. Bradley Wilson appeared on a morning show, tears glistening in his eyes as he described being scapegoated for company policies. Ms. Johnson is trying to blame frontline employees for decisions made at the highest levels, he claimed, looking directly into the camera with practiced sincerity. Zara's phone rang constantly. Journalists seeking comment. Board members distancing themselves. Even old friends questioning what was happening. News vans surrounded her known addresses and company headquarters. By noon, the damage was escalating. Customer cancellations poured in. The stock price dropped 15% in 3 hours. Employees received an official message stating that Zara had been temporarily suspended pending investigation. They've frozen my personal accounts, Zara told the team as they regrouped, claiming it's part of the financial investigation. Carmen arrived with more troubling news. They threatened Marcus's family. His wife got a call this morning warning her that their children's school records could be accidentally lost if he continued supporting you. Zara's jaw tightened as Marcus nodded grimly. They told me to publicly distance myself from you by noon, or there would be consequences. You should do it, Zara said immediately. Your family comes first. I'm not abandoning you. Marcus insisted, though fear for his family showed clearly in his eyes. A strategic retreat isn't abandonment, Zara countered. Make the statement they want. Stay inside the company. We need eyes there. The hits kept coming. Zara scheduled a press conference at a downtown hotel, only to have the sound system mysteriously fail as she began speaking. Journalists who did manage to hear her found themselves asking hostile questions based on false information that had been fed to them just minutes before. Someone leaked the location Darius noted, still moving gingerly from his injuries, and they had plants in the press corps. By evening, the situation seemed hopeless. Public opinion had turned decisively against Zara based on an avalanche of manufactured evidence. Richard Harrington, meanwhile, was being portrayed as the steady hand, saving a troubled company from incompetent leadership. We need to understand what we're really fighting, Zara said, finally gathering her battered team. This isn't just about discrimination policies or even a corporate takeover. The level of resources they're deploying suggests something bigger at stake. Darius nodded, connecting his laptop to a larger screen. I've been digging into Global Air's financials. Their stock has been artificially inflated for months. They need this acquisition to cover serious cash flow problems. And there's something else. He pulled up documents showing connections between Richard Harrington and several online extremist groups known for their white nationalist views. This isn't just business, Aisha concluded. For Richard, this is ideological. Zara stared at the evidence pieces falling into place, so it's not enough that he wants to steal my company. He specifically can't stand that someone like me built it and runs it successfully. The media battle is just a distraction, Carmen added. While we're fighting public perception, they're moving to complete the sale before anyone can stop them. Zara stood pacing the small room. Then we stopped playing their game. We've been reactive defensive. It's time to change tactics completely. What do you have in mind? Aisha asked. If we can't win in their arena, Zara replied, we create our own. Have you ever had someone spread lies about you? How did it make you feel to have your character assassinated when you knew the truth? Comment number 1, if you've experienced something similar, or number 2, if you've been lucky enough to avoid this kind of attack. While you're thinking about that, smash that like button if you believe in fighting back against injustice with truth. And don't forget to subscribe to see how Zara counters this massive media assault against her reputation. The question now becomes just how far will Richard and his allies go to destroy everything Zara has built? Are they willing to cross even more dangerous lines? And who might still stand with Zara when speaking the truth could put their own families at risk? The battle is about to move underground, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Midnight found Zara and her core team relocating to their third safe house in 24 hours. This one was a small apartment above a bodega in a neighborhood far from the corporate world of downtown. The building's elderly owner, Mrs. Diaz, nodded in silent understanding when Carmen explained they needed a place without questions. We need to stop running and start fighting back, Zara said, pinning maps and diagrams to a makeshift bulletin board. Aisha, what's our legal situation? Despite her exhaustion, Aisha's mind remained razor-sharp. I found a potential loophole in the share freeze. The emergency injunction specifically references your personal shares, but doesn't account for the 10% held in your grandmother's family trust. If we can document your status as trustee, we might regain enough voting power to block an immediate sale. That's something. Zara nodded. Darius, how's the evidence recovery going? Darius, still wincing from his injuries, looked up from his computer. I've been reconstructing deleted files from our secure backups. Richard was thorough, but not thorough enough. I've recovered emails between him and Bradley, discussing how to implement the passenger compatibility system without triggering anti-discrimination safeguards. What about outside support? Marcus asked via encrypted video call. He had publicly distanced himself from Zara as planned, but was still secretly providing critical information. I've been making calls, Carmen said. Found other minority employees who face discrimination. Many are scared to come forward, but some are willing to help if we can protect them. A knock at the door silenced everyone. Carmen peered through the peephole, then relaxed slightly. It's Jackson. Jackson Williams entered cautiously, 6'3" with a military bearing. He had been fired from Horizon 6 months earlier after reporting discrimination in pilot assignments. I got your message, he said to Carmen. I'm in. Whatever you need. We need evidence and witnesses, Zara explained, and people willing to stand up despite the risks. I know pilots who've been passed over for promotion because they don't fit the traditional image, Jackson responded. Some will talk. As the night progressed, more allies emerged. Sophia Martinez, a current flight attendant who had witnessed Bradley's discriminatory practices, arrived with internal communications proving the pattern was widespread. She had risked her job to smuggle these documents out. Bradley makes us file reports on passenger compatibility issues, Sophia explained. But it's all code for identifying which passengers he thinks don't belong in first class based on race. Darius made another breakthrough around 3:00 a.m. I found Richard's connections to online extremist groups. He's been participating in private forums discussing restoring traditional aviation and maintaining appropriate passenger demographics. The language gets much more explicit in some private messages. Can we use this publicly? Zara asked. Not directly, Aisha cautioned. But it helps explain his motivation and might help us predict his next moves. By dawn, Carmen had uncovered something even more disturbing. The maintenance violations weren't just about cutting corners for profit. They've been systematically neglecting safety inspections on aircraft, primarily serving routes to predominantly minority communities. The risk calculations were explicit. Their planning was interrupted by Marcus's urgent call. They're searching for you. Armed private security just raided my house. They're telling employees that you fled with company secrets. They've accelerated the timeline. The board vote and sale signing are both happening today. Zara was processing this when another unexpected ally reached out. Maya Stevens, a passenger who had witnessed Zara's mistreatment on the original flight, contacted them through Sophia. I'm a civil rights attorney, her message read. What I saw on that plane was textbook discrimination. I want to help. Meeting Maya at a public park for safety. Zara was impressed by the attorney's strategic thinking. This isn't just a corporate dispute anymore, Mia explained. The discriminatory patterns, safety violations targeting specific communities, and coordinated character assassination campaign create multiple legal vulnerabilities for Richard and his allies. Their planning session was interrupted when Darius's security system triggered an alert. They found our location, he warned, already packing equipment. Private security, 4 vehicles approaching. What followed was a chaotic evacuation. The team splitting up to create multiple targets. Zara and Maya fled in one direction, Carmen and Sophia in another, while Darius and Jackson created a digital diversion to buy them time. Zara found herself in the passenger seat as Mia executed evasive driving maneuvers learned from a previous life representing clients against powerful corporate interests. They're still following, Mia warned, watching the black SUV gaining in the rearview mirror. The chase through city streets was heart-topping. Sharp turns down narrow alleys, last-second direction, changes, and finally a desperate dash through a crowded farmers market that their pursuers couldn't navigate with their larger vehicles. Where can we go? Maya asked once they'd lost their tail. They'll have all your properties under surveillance. Zara directed them to a community center in the neighborhood where she had grown up, a place she had continued to support anonymously even after her success. The director, Mrs. Coleman, took one look at Zara's exhausted face and ushered them into a back office without questions. I remember when you used to study here because the heat in your apartment didn't work. Mrs. Coleman said, bringing them coffee. "Whatever trouble you're in, this place stands with you." As team members gradually reconvened using their emergency protocols, the community rallied around them. Local residents kept watch for suspicious vehicles. Teenagers ran interference with would-be observers. An underground network formed organically to protect one of their own. "We have less than 8 hours before the board meeting and sale signing," Zara told the reassembled team. "We need to approach this differently. If Richard controls the media, the board, and physical access to company locations, we need to find pressure points he doesn't control. We need leverage," Meyer agreed. "And we need to get proof of both the discrimination and the corporate malfeasance to people who can act on it." As they formulated their new strategy, Zara looked around at the diverse group of allies who had come together, current and former employees, community members, professionals, offering their skills. The very diversity that Richard Harrington despised had become her greatest strength. "There's one more potential ally," Darius said hesitantly. "Someone who might have insider information we desperately need. But reaching out to them would be extremely risky." At this point, Zara replied, determination hardening her voice. "Calculated risks are all we have left." Central Park hummed with typical Saturday morning activity. Joggers circling the reservoir, tourists consulting maps, children racing toward playgrounds. Zara sat alone on a bench near Bethesda Fountain. Dark sunglasses hiding her eyes, a baseball cap pulled low over her face. The burner phone in her pocket vibrated with a text containing a single-word carousel. She walked unhurriedly toward the landmark, maintaining situational awareness as Darius had instructed. The elaborate security precautions had seemed excessive when planning this meeting, but after yesterday's high-speed chase, she appreciated the team's caution. The carousel's cheerful music provided cover for quiet conversation as Zara pretended to admire the painted horses. A man in a grey hoodie sidled up beside her, keeping his face angled away from nearby security cameras. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Thomas Reynolds said quietly. "I wasn't sure you were really willing to help," Zara replied, studying the chief of security who had recognized her on that fateful flight. "Your text was unexpected. I've been watching what they're doing to you," Thomas said, voice tight. "It's not what I signed up for." "What did you sign up for exactly?" Thomas hesitated, shame evident in his posture. "Richard recruited me last year, said he needed security personnel who understood the importance of traditional values in aviation. The job paid well-offered advancement. I told myself it was just business. And now I've seen them plant evidence against innocent people, threaten families, cover up safety violations that could kill hundreds. There's a line, and they've crossed it." Zara maintained her casual pose, though her heart raced. "What can you tell me that I don't already know?" Thomas pulled a small device from his pocket, sliding it toward her beneath his palm. "Everything. Richard's entire playbook. Messages between him and Walter Sterling planning to intentionally devalue Horizon for a cheaper sale. Screenshots showing the kickbacks Richard would receive after Global Air takes over. Accident investigation reports that were falsified to hide negligence. Documentation of how they systematically harassed minority employees who complained." "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Zara asked, pocketing the device. "They have leverage over everyone close to them." Thomas admitted, eyes darting around the park. "My brother has a record. Richard implied it could be problematic for his parole if I didn't cooperate." But last week his voice faltered. "They had me deliver a threat to a flight attendant's teenage daughter. A child. That's when I started copying files." Zara was about to respond when Thomas stiffened. "Don't react," he warned under his breath. "Southeast entrance, security team. 2 men in plain clothes." But with the unmistakable bearing of private security, had entered the park scanning methodically. "They must have tracked me," Thomas muttered. "I was careful, but Richard's paranoid. Has everyone watched?" "There's a service exit behind the carousel," Zara said calmly. "My team is monitoring it." Too late, Thomas responded as the men spotted them and began moving purposefully in their direction. "Listen carefully. The most damning evidence is in a folder labeled Project Phoenix. Richard and Sterling recorded their meetings, planning to clean house after the takeover. Sterling specifically talked about targeting route-serving minority communities. You need to, he cut off as the men closed in one, speaking urgently into a wrist microphone. Run, Thomas urged. I'll stall them. Thomas, go. This is my chance to do something right. What followed was chaos. Thomas confronted the security personnel, loudly accusing them of harassment in front of park visitors. As attention focused on the disturbance, Zara slipped away toward the service exit where Maya waited in a maintenance uniform. The shouting behind them escalated. Zara glanced back to see Thomas tackled to the ground, fighting desperately as a third security officer attempted to wrest something from his hands. A flash drive. Zara realized a duplicate of what she now carried. Gunshots cracked the morning air, security firing at Thomas as he broke free and ran. Park visitors screamed, dropping to the ground or fleeing in panic. Zara instinctively moved to help him, but Maya pulled her back. You can't help him by getting caught too, she insisted as they escaped through maintenance corridors. Hours later, safely back at their community center headquarters, they watched the news in stunned silence. Thomas Reynolds had been hospitalized with gunshot wounds. The official story claimed he had attacked park security officers after being identified as a person of interest in a corporate espionage case. Worse, a statement attributed to Thomas renounced all his claims against Horizon Airways, describing himself as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge. The stilted language and formal phrasing made it obvious the statement had been coerced. They got to him at the hospital, Aisha said grimly. Probably threatened his brother again. Darius had been examining the device Thomas provided. Some of the files are corrupted. The device was damaged during the struggle. I'm trying to recover what I can, but the Project Phoenix folder is currently inaccessible. Team morale plummeted as they watched Thomas being portrayed as unstable and vindictive across all media channels. Richard Harrington appeared on screen, expressing deep concern for Mr. Reynolds' well-being, while emphasizing that his accusations were completely unfounded. Thomas risked everything, Zara said quietly, watching the character assassination unfold in real time. And they're destroying him just like they tried to destroy me. We still have some of the evidence, Carmen reminded her. And the board meeting hasn't happened yet. But our safest potential ally is now compromised, Darius pointed out. And Richard knows we're actively gathering evidence, which means he'll accelerate his timeline even further. Zara concluded, we need to move now, even with incomplete information. Maya, who had been consulting with legal colleagues, returned with a new strategy. We can't beat them in the media right now, and we might not have time for regulatory agencies to act. But there's one arena where evidence still matters and procedures must be followed. The courts, Aisha said, immediately understanding. Exactly, Maya confirmed. We file for an emergency injunction first thing tomorrow morning. Richard expects us to stay underground. He won't anticipate us walking directly into a courtroom. It's risky, Jackson warned. They'll have legal teams ready to counter. It's our best remaining option, Zara decided. We present whatever evidence we have directly to a judge, force Richard to respond under oath rather than through media surrogates. As they prepared legal documents through the night, Zara couldn't shake the image of Thomas bleeding on the ground while fighting to give her the evidence she needed. The stakes had escalated beyond corporate control or even discrimination. People's lives were now directly at risk. We've one shot at this, she told the exhausted team as dawn approached. Let's make it count. The Manhattan courthouse loomed imposingly against the morning sky, its stone columns projecting an aura of impartial justice that Zara desperately hoped would prove true today. Her legal team, led by Maya Stevens and Aisha Okafor, flanked her as they climbed the steps, reporters shouting questions from behind hastily established police barriers. Ms. Johnson, are you responding to the criminal complaints filed against you? Is it true you're seeking asylum in another country? What do you say to allegations you endangered passenger safety? Zara maintained her composure, neither responding nor reacting to the increasingly outlandish accusations. Inside security was unusually tight, with officers checking identification multiple times before allowing them to proceed to courtroom 347, where Judge Harrison Blackwood would hear their emergency petition. "Remember," Maya whispered as they waited, "Blackwood has connections to Richard through Westlake Country Club and charity boards. He'll appear impartial, but look for procedural reasons to rule against us. We filed companion cases with 3 other judges." Aisha added, "If Blackwood dismisses us too quickly, we have backup options." The courtroom doors opened. Richard Harrington sat confidently at the respondents' table, surrounded by at least 8 attorneys from Preston Grant and Hodes, the city's most expensive corporate law firm. He offered Zara a small, smug smile as she entered. Judge Blackwood, a stern man in his 60s with carefully maintained silver hair, surveyed the assembled parties with obvious impatience. "This court has a full docket today. I've reviewed the emergency petition and find it rather extraordinary in its claims." "Proceed quickly," Counsellor Maya rose, projecting professional confidence despite the hostile environment. "Your Honour, we seek an emergency injunction to prevent the improper sale of Horizon Airways through fraudulent means. Ms. Johnson's controlling shares have been illegally frozen through a series of manipulated legal maneuvers designed specifically to facilitate a corporate takeover at an artificially depressed price." Richard's lead attorney, James Preston, immediately objected. "Your Honour, these accusations are baseless. The share freeze was properly obtained due to serious concerns about Ms. Johnson's financial management and potential self-dealing." Judge Blackwood nodded. "Ms. Stevens, do you have evidence supporting these rather dramatic claims?" "We do, Your Honour." Maya presented their first exhibit's documentation, showing the suspicious timing of complaints against Zara, all filed by parties with connections to Richard or Global Air. The judge appeared to review the materials, but Zara noted he barely glanced at key pages. "This appears to be circumstantial at best," he commented dismissively. For the next hour, the pattern continued. Every piece of evidence presented by Zara's team was minimized or dismissed on procedural grounds. Meanwhile, Richard's attorneys were given wide latitude to present falsified performance data and testimony from clearly coached witnesses. The courtroom atmosphere grew increasingly tense as Judge Blackwood sustained objection after objection from Richard's team while frequently interrupting Mia's arguments. When Aisha attempted to present evidence of discriminatory practices, the judge cut her off sharply. "This court is considering a very narrow question regarding share ownership. Allegations about company policies are irrelevant to these proceedings." During a brief recess, Zara huddled with her legal team. "He's not even pretending to be impartial," she whispered. "We expected this," Maya reminded her. "We have contingencies." When proceedings resumed, Zara watched in mounting dismay as a parade of witnesses testified to her supposed erratic behavior and concerning management decisions. Most damaging was a medical expert who, despite never having met Zara, testified that her actions showed patterns consistent with executive burnout and decision-making impairment. Just as hope seemed lost, Mia played her carefully planned card. "Your Honour, I would like to enter into evidence documents provided by Thomas Reynolds, Chief of Security at Horizon Airways, demonstrating systematic fraud in the preparation for this company sale." Richard visibly tensed, exchanging concerned glances with his attorneys. Judge Blackwood frowned. "Mr. Reynolds has publicly recanted any accusations. Under duress, Your Honour. We have evidence that his statement was coerced following a violent assault by private security personnel hired by Mr. Harrington." For the first time, the judge appeared genuinely interested. Examining the partial records recovered from Thomas's damaged device, Richard's attorneys huddled in urgent consultation. Zara allowed herself a moment of cautious optimism. Perhaps the evidence was compelling enough even for a biased judge to recognize the truth. Perhaps justice would prevail despite Richard's connections. That hope was crushed minutes later when Judge Blackwood looked up with a carefully neutral expression. "While these allegations are concerning, they represent an incomplete picture at best. This court finds insufficient evidence to lift the temporary share freeze. Furthermore, given the urgency of Horizon Airways' business needs, I am approving the expedited vote on company sale as requested by the board. The restraining order keeping Ms. Johnson from company premises is extended pending further investigation. The gavel fell with devastating finality. Richard didn't quite smile, but the satisfaction in his eyes was unmistakable as he gathered his papers. Outside the courtroom, Maya was already on her phone, filing the emergency appeal they had prepared. "It will take days to get on the calendar," she admitted grimly. "And Richard will ensure the sale is completed before then." News cameras captured their exit from the courthouse, where Richard gave a victory press conference on the front steps. "Justice has been served today," he announced smoothly. "Horizon Airways can now move forward with the strategic partnership that will secure its future. I regret that Ms. Johnson's personal issues have created this unfortunate situation." The day deteriorated further that evening. Their legal team's offices were broken into, critical files stolen. Maya received notice of a fraudulent ethics complaint filed against her with the State Bar Association. Additional restraining orders were served, prohibiting Zara from contacting company employees or board members. Back at their community centre headquarters, the team faced their darkest moment. Every legal avenue appeared exhausted. The sale vote was scheduled for 10:00 a.m. tomorrow at Global Air's headquarters. Within 24 hours, everything Zara had built would legally belong to Walter Sterling and Richard Harrington. "The system is rigged," Jackson said bitterly. "They control the media, the courts, even physical access to buildings." What's left? Zara stared at the timeline they had constructed on the wall, thinking about everything they had learned about their opponent's ruthlessness. "They've blocked every legitimate avenue," she said finally. "So we stopped playing by their rules." "What exactly are you suggesting?" Aisha asked cautiously. Zara pointed to the blueprint of Global Air headquarters that Darius had obtained. "If we can't stop the signing legally, we need to be physically present when it happens. We need to confront Richard and Sterling directly with whatever evidence we have in front of the entire board and executive team." "You're talking about infiltrating one of the most secure corporate buildings in the city," Carmen said, "while being actively hunted by private security." "Exactly," Zara confirmed. "They've taken everything from us except the truth. Tomorrow, we bring that truth directly to the people who need to hear it. No intermediaries, no legal barriers, no media filters. It's incredibly risky," Maya warned, "potentially crossing legal lines ourselves." "Do we have a choice?" Zara asked simply. "Thomas is in the hospital because he tried to help us. Dozens of employees have been threatened. Minority passengers have been systematically mistreated. Safety regulations have been ignored on certain routes, putting lives at risk. If we do nothing, Richard and Sterling will destroy everything we've built and hurt countless more people." One by one, team members nodded their agreement. The legitimate paths had been closed to them. All that remained was direct action, whatever the personal cost. "Then let's plan this properly," Darius said, pulling out detailed security schematics. "If we're going to crash their party, we need to make it count. What would you do if all legal options were exhausted? Would you give up when the system failed you, or would you take matters into your own hands? Comment number 1, if you'd fight to the end like Zara, or number 2, if you'd accept defeat and move on. Hit that like button if you believe true justice sometimes requires extraordinary courage. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about standing up against impossible odds. But wait, how will Zara and her team possibly infiltrate such a heavily guarded building? Will they manage to expose the truth before the final documents are signed? And just how far is Richard willing to go to stop them if they're discovered? The most dangerous part of this journey is just beginning, and the confrontation that's coming will change everything forever. Pre-dawn fog shrouded Global Air headquarters as the final preparations for Zara's infiltration plan came together. The luxury resort on the outskirts of the city had been chosen specifically for its exclusivity and security features, high walls, limited access points, and a private security force that kept unwanted visitors far from the corporate elite inside. Final equipment checks, Sophia Martinez said, distributing hotel staff uniforms she had obtained through industry contacts. Having worked in hospitality before joining Horizon Airways, she knew exactly how to make them look authentic. Remember, Service staff are meant to be invisible. Keep your eyes down, move efficiently, don't engage unless spoken to. Carmen created the initial diversion, arriving at the service entrance in a maintenance van borrowed from a sympathetic colleague. HVAC emergency call, she explained to the guard, showing falsified work orders Darius had created. Conference rooms are reporting temperature fluctuations. Can't have executives sweating during million-dollar negotiations, can we? The guard barely glanced at her paperwork before waving her through. As planned, she headed directly to the central mechanical room, where she could access both the environmental systems and the security door controls. Darius, operating from a van parked within signal range but out of sight, guided her via earpiece. Main security panel is on the east wall. Once you connect my bypass module, I'll have temporary access to their camera feeds and electronic locks. You'll have approximately 7 minutes before their fail-safe protocols detect the intrusion. Carmen worked quickly, fingers steady despite the pressure. Module connected, proceeding to Phase 2. With Darius now controlling key security systems, Zara and Aisha approached the staff entrance in catering uniforms, pushing a cart loaded with breakfast pastries, their falsified IDs, past the initial scan. The temporarily looped camera feeds showed only regular staff movement, hiding their presence from the security team monitoring the system. Southeast corridor clear. Darius's voice came through their nearly invisible earpieces. 3 security personnel in the main kitchen. Avoid if possible. Zara pushed the cart, deliberately projecting the confidence of someone who belonged. They navigated the service corridors, passing other staff who barely glanced their way. Conditioned to ignore the workers who maintain the invisible infrastructure of luxury. A tense moment came when Bradley Wilson appeared unexpectedly around a corner. Zara quickly lowered her face, adjusting her cap as he passed. He paused briefly, a flicker of recognition crossing his features before a senior executive called his name, pulling his attention away. "Too close," Aisha breathed once he'd moved on. "But we're still on track." Zara responded, checking the small tablet concealed beneath their serving cloths. Board meeting begins in 45 minutes. Signing ceremony immediately after the YAI plan called for them to access the conference rooms through staff entrances, positioning themselves to observe until the critical moment. However, as they approached the executive wing, they encountered additional security measures not shown in their borrowed blueprints. Biometric scanners. Aisha whispered, noting the fingerprint readers beside each door. "They've upgraded since these plans were created." Darius Zara murmured into her concealed microphone. "We need an alternative route." After a tense pause, his voice returned. Service elevator to the 3rd floor, then through the executive suite. Richards reserved the presidential suite for preparation before the meeting. If you can access it, there's a connecting door to the conference level. This deviation would be far riskier than their original plan. The executive suite would likely be occupied, possibly by Richard himself. But with time running short and their primary route blocked, they had little choice. The service elevator deposited them on the 3rd floor, where luxury reached new heights. Plush carpeting muffled their footsteps as they wheeled their cart toward the presidential suite. "Wait," Darius warned suddenly. Richard's inside with someone connecting to room audio. Through their earpieces came Richard's voice, smug and unguarded. "Sterling agreed to the final price reduction last night. 30% below market value, with guaranteed positions for our key people. Once we sign the first order of business, we'll be dismantling her diversity initiatives." "Back to a proper airline," a second voice responded. "Walter Sterling, CEO of Global Air. The shareholders will complain initially about the purchase price, but once we implement the new route strategy, profitability will silence them. The B board doesn't need to know about our private arrangement." Zara and Aisha exchanged glances. This was explicit confirmation of the fraud they suspected. Zara gestured toward an unoccupied room nearby, a smaller suite where they might wait for Richard to leave. Inside, they discovered something unexpected. Documents spread across a desk, including what appeared to be the final acquisition agreement. Zara quickly photographed key pages while Aisha stood watch. "They've reduced the price again?" Zara whispered, examining the documents. "And look at this clause. Immediate termination rights for redundant executive positions without standard severance. That would target your entire leadership team. Aisha confirmed. More disturbing was a folder labeled Enhanced Security Protocols, containing what appeared to be recording devices and documentation of surveillance on board members who had expressed reservations about the sale. They're blackmailing resistant board members. Zara realized that's why everyone fell in line so quickly. Their discovery was interrupted by voices approaching in the hallway. They barely managed to slip out through a connecting bathroom before Richard and Sterling entered, continuing their confidential conversation. Now, off their planned route and running out of time, they navigated through service areas toward the main conference center. Security presence had increased noticeably with teams methodically checking staff credentials. "Something's wrong," Darius warned through their earpieces. "They've detected my access to their systems. Security alert in progress." Carmen's voice cut in urgently. "They're locking down the resort main entrance already secured. You need to move now." Their carefully planned infiltration dissolved into improvisation as security teams began actively searching the building. Zara and Aisha abandoned their catering cart, moving rapidly toward the conference center where board members would soon gather. Board meetings started early. Darius reported alarm evident in his voice. They moved up the schedule. Voting happening now. This unexpected acceleration forced their hand. Without the full team in position, without their carefully planned entry, they would have to act immediately or lose everything. As they rounded the final corner to the conference room, they encountered a security checkpoint with armed guards checking each entrant. Their catering disguises would not pass this level of scrutiny. "Distraction required at the north entrance," Zara instructed through her microphone. Carmen responded instantly, triggering a fire alarm in a distant section of the building. As predicted, security protocols diverted personnel to the potential emergency, temporarily reducing the checkpoint staffing. In the confusion, Zara and Aisha slipped through a service entrance, emerging in a small preparation area adjacent to the main conference room. Through a partially open door, they could see Richard standing at the head of the table. Board members seated around him, many looking uncomfortable but resigned. The vote stands at 7 in favor, 2 abstaining. Richard was saying the motion to approve the acquisition by Global Air Passes. "We'll proceed immediately to the signing ceremony." They were too late. The vote had already happened. Zara's company had just been sold out from under her. As security alerts blared throughout the building, Zara realized their carefully constructed plan had failed. The only option remaining was direct confrontation. Risky, desperate, but their only chance to stop the final signatures from being applied to the documents being distributed around the table. "New plan," she whispered to Aisha. "We go in now." While Zara and Aisha prepared for their desperate confrontation inside Global Air headquarters, forces were gathering outside. Jackson Williams, coordinating from their community center base, had spent the night activating a network that even Zara didn't fully realize existed. Perimeter security has tripled since this morning. Maya Stevens reported via encrypted call from her position near the resort entrance. "They're treating this like a high threat situation. That won't stop what's coming," Jackson replied, watching his phone as confirmation messages arrived from across the city. "How much longer can Zara and Aisha stay hidden inside?" Darius says the security sweeps are getting closer to their position. "Minutes at most." Jackson nodded grimly. "Tell them to hold as long as possible. Reinforcements are almost in position. Those reinforcements represented an alliance months in the making, catalyzed by Zara's current crisis, but built on foundations laid long before Horizon Airways employees who had experienced discrimination. Former passengers who had been mistreated based on race. Community organizations from neighborhoods Zara had quietly supported for years. Civil rights groups Mia had contacted. Transportation safety advocates concerned about the maintenance violations Carmen had documented. Dozens of vehicles now approach the resort from multiple directions. A coordinated convergence timed to maximum effect. News vans followed, alerted by strategic leaks about major developments in the Horizon Airways situation. Inside the conference room, Richard Harrington was distributing signing documents when his phone buzzed with an urgent security alert. The momentary distraction was all Zara needed. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," she announced, stepping confidently into the room with Aisha beside her. "I believe you're about to make a catastrophic mistake." The shock that rippled through the room was palpable. Board members half rose from their seats, Richard's face contorted with rage and disbelief. "Security," he shouted, reaching for an internal phone. "They're rather busy at the moment," Zara replied calmly, moving to the head of the table opposite Richard. "I suggest you all look outside before signing anything." Walter Sterling, Global Air's CEO, moved toward a window and pulled back the curtain. His expression shifted from confusion to alarm as he saw the growing crowd assembling at the resort gates. News helicopters now circled overhead, capturing the scene. "What is this?" he demanded. "This," Zara answered, "is what happens when you try to steal a company built on diversity and inclusion, Mr. Sterling. Those people represent everyone you and Richard plan to harm: employees, customers, communities." Richard recovered quickly, his voice smooth, as he addressed the startled board. "This is a desperate publicity stunt by Ms. Johnson. Security will remove her momentarily, and we can proceed with our legitimate business." Before they do, Zara countered, "You might want to examine these." She nodded to Aisha, who distributed copies of the documents they had photographed in Richard's suite. These show the actual sale price Mr. Harrington negotiated 30% below market value. They also detail his personal compensation package from Global Air following the sale, which he neglected to disclose to this board. Board members murmured as they reviewed the material's expressions darkening. And these, Aisha continued, providing additional documents, show the surveillance and blackmail operations Mr. Harrington authorized against board members who initially opposed the sale. The boardroom erupted in angry exclamations as members recognized their own names in the surveillance reports. Richard's carefully constructed facade began crumbling as accusations flew from previously compliant board members. Outside, the situation was escalating rapidly. The alliance Jackson had assembled had grown to hundreds of people, their presence impossible to ignore. Maya coordinated with media contacts, ensuring cameras captured key moments and messages. "We have a statement from Thomas Reynolds," a reporter announced on live television, reading from a hospital bed declaration that contradicted his earlier forced recantation. He confirms that Richard Harrington ordered illegal surveillance and safety violations targeting minority passengers. Inside, Richard's phone rang continuously as executives demanded explanations for the chaos unfolding. Walter Sterling had moved away from Richard, already beginning to distance himself from the emerging scandal. "Even if these allegations have merit?" Richard attempted, voice strained. "The vote has been taken. The sale is approved under false pretenses," Zara replied. "With critical information withheld from board members, any competent court would invalidate such a vote immediately." As Richard searched for a response, the conference room doors burst open again. Security personnel entered, but instead of removing Zara, their leader addressed the board directly. "Mr. Harrington, we have a situation requiring your immediate attention. Federal agents have arrived with warrants. The final pieces of Jackson's alliance had moved into place. A transportation safety investigator who had been reviewing Carmen's evidence. Financial crimes specialists examining the manipulated stock transactions Darius had uncovered. Civil rights enforcement officers responding to the systematic discrimination Maya had documented. Walter Sterling moved swiftly to salvage what he could. Global Air was not aware of any improprieties in this transaction. He announced loudly, clearly, for the benefit of witnesses. "In light of these concerning allegations, we are temporarily suspending acquisition proceedings pending full investigation." Board members began leaving the table, creating distance from Richard both literally and figuratively. His carefully orchestrated takeover was disintegrating before his eyes. Richard's face hardened as he realized the extent of his defeat. In a final desperate move, he grabbed Walter's arm. "You can't back out now. We had an agreement. The diversification of aviation must be stopped. These people don't belong in our industry." The naked prejudice in his statement, spoken loudly enough for everyone to hear, silenced the room. Walter pulled away, visibly uncomfortable. "I think we're done here, Richard." As federal agents entered the conference room, Richard faced Zara across the table one last time. "You think you've won? You've proven nothing. I still have connections resources." "What you don't have," Zara replied calmly, "is my airline, and you never will." Outside, the alliance continued growing as more supporters arrived, drawn by live news coverage. What had begun as Zara's personal fight had transformed into something larger, a visible public stand against discrimination that resonated far beyond one company's boardroom. As Zara finally emerged from the resort walking toward the assembled crowd, she was met with cheers and support from hundreds of people she had never met, but who had risen to stand with her. Among them were Horizon Airways employees wearing their uniforms proudly. Customers sharing stories of fair treatment community members from neighborhoods that had benefited from Zara's quiet philanthropy. Maya met her at the gate, relief evident in her expression. It worked. The sale is suspended. Richard is being questioned by federal agents. And the company Zara asked. The board is in chaos, but the share freeze has been temporarily lifted pending investigation. You're still the controlling shareholder. Zara surveyed the remarkable coalition that had assembled diverse in every way imaginable, united by a common cause. This, she realized, was the true strength Richard had never understood and could never defeat. Not just her determination, but the power of community standing together against injustice. As news cameras captured the scene, Zara stepped forward to address not just her supporters, but a watching world learning. For the first time, the full story of what had nearly happened at Horizon Airways. The following week brought the final confrontation Zara had been building toward since that first humiliating moment on her own aircraft. With her controlling shares reinstated through emergency court action and federal investigations underway into Richard's activities, she had called for an extraordinary board meeting at Horizon Airways headquarters. Unlike the secretive off-site meeting Richard had arranged, Zara ensured this one would be completely transparent. Shareholders were invited to observe via secure video feed. Key employees from every level of the company were present in the boardroom. Even select members of the media had been admitted, their cameras positioned discreetly along the walls. Richard Harrington entered flanked by attorneys. His normally immaculate appearance showing signs of strain after days of intense scrutiny. Federal investigations into securities, fraud, safety violations, and civil rights abuses had already resulted in the resignation of 3 board members with close ties to him. "This meeting is invalid," Richard announced, immediately refusing to take his seat. "I've filed injunctions challenging Miss Johnson's authority to call for such proceedings. Those injunctions were denied this morning," Aisha replied, calmly sliding court documents across the table. "Judge Morrison found your claims without merit." The reconstituted board, now missing Richard's closest allies, listened attentively as Zara presented a comprehensive review of the attempted takeover and the discriminatory practices implemented during her absence. Evidence methodically detailed how passenger compatibility policies had targeted minority travelers, how crew assignments had favored certain demographics, how maintenance schedules had been manipulated based on route demographics. Most disturbing, Zara concluded, is that these weren't just aggressive business tactics. They represented an ideological attempt to fundamentally change what Horizon Airways stands for. Our core commitment to treating all passengers and employees with dignity and respect. Board members, many now facing potential liability for their roles in approving Richard's initiatives, distanced themselves from the policies under discussion. We were presented with incomplete information. One insisted the discriminatory impact was never made clear to us. Yet internal communications show these outcomes were explicitly discussed. Zara countered, displaying messages Darius had recovered. As the evidence mounted, Richard's position deteriorated. His remaining allies on the board gradually fell silent. The attorneys beside him passed notes with increasing urgency. When presented with the evidence of safety violations, several board members visibly recoiled. These are operational details board members wouldn't normally review. Richard attempted, sweat visible on his forehead despite the room's careful climate control. Operational details that put lives at risk. Carmen interjected, presenting maintenance records showing systematic neglect of aircraft serving certain routes. These weren't oversights, they were calculations. The meeting reached its pivotal moment when Zara introduced her final witness. Thomas Reynolds entered in a wheelchair, still recovering from his injuries, but determined to testify in person. Security personnel throughout the room tensed visibly at his appearance. Mr. Reynolds has provided a complete statement to federal investigators, Zara informed the board. Today, he's here to address the company directly. Thomas's testimony proved devastating. In measured tones, he detailed how Richard had built a shadow security operation targeting employees who raised concerns about discrimination. He described Richard's explicit instructions to create compatibility systems that would gradually remove undesirable elements from premium cabins. Most damning was his account of the meeting where Richard and Walter Sterling had discussed their plans to clean house after the acquisition. Mr. Sterling specifically asked how quickly they could replace diverse leadership without triggering legal problems. Thomas recalled, Mr. Harrington assured him they had created sufficient documentation to justify terminations based on performance rather than protected characteristics. Richard finally abandoned any pretense of composure. This is absurd. Sterling understands the airline business has tradition standards. Certain passengers expect a particular atmosphere in premium cabins. That's not discrimination, it's customer service. His outburst hung in the air, captured by every recording device in the room. Board members physically leaned away from him, recognizing the legal liability his words created. Walter Sterling, watching via video conference, immediately disconnected. His public relations team issued a statement within minutes distancing Global Air from Richard's comments and announcing the company was fully cooperating with all investigations. Richard, realizing he had severely miscalculated, attempted damage control. My comments have been taken out of context. Of course, Global Air values diversity. This entire situation has been manufactured by Ms. Johnson to avoid legitimate questions about her management. I believe this board has heard enough, said Eleanor Matsui, the most senior remaining board member. I move for an immediate vote of no confidence in Mr. Harrington's continued leadership. The motion passed unanimously, even Richard's former allies abandoning him in the face of overwhelming evidence and potential personal liability. Security personnel now reporting directly to Zara, rather than Richard, stepped forward to escort him from the building. In a final desperate move, Richard grabbed a tablet from the table and addressed Walter Sterling on the still active video link that only he could see on his screen. The deal isn't dead. We can still make this work. I have contingency plans. Leverage against board members. Johnson doesn't understand what she's dealing with. End the call. Richard Walter replied coldly, his image visible only to Richard. Your services are no longer required. As security moved to remove him, Richard made one last attempt, revealing the depth of prejudice that had driven his actions. This airline was built by men like us, not people like her. You're letting everything we built be destroyed. These people don't belong in first class. They don't belong in the executive suite. They don't belong in control. His unfiltered outburst, captured for posterity by multiple recording devices, ended any chance of salvaging his reputation or career. Security finally removed him from the boardroom, his ranting still audible as he was escorted through the executive floor. With Richard gone, Zara addressed the remaining board members directly. Horizon Airways was founded on a simple principle that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect when they travel. That principle is not negotiable. Any board member who cannot fully embrace that vision should resign immediately. 3 more members quietly gathered their materials and left the room. Those who remained, including Eleanor Matsul, expressed their commitment to rebuilding the company's governance and restoring its values. As the extraordinary meeting concluded, Zara found herself standing in the empty boardroom. The magnitude of what had transpired slowly sinking in. She had not merely saved her company from takeover. She had exposed and excised a cancer of discrimination that had been growing within it. Outside employees gathered in the atrium had watched the proceedings on large screens. Their spontaneous applause as Zara emerged told her everything she needed to know about the company's path forward. 3 months after the dramatic boardroom confrontation, Zara stood before the assembled employees of Horizon Airways in the company's largest hangar. Behind her gleamed the newest addition to their fleet, its fresh paint job featuring the company's reimagined logo. The same graceful horizon line she had painted herself on their first aircraft, now complemented by a rising sun symbolizing new beginnings. Today marks not just a new chapter for our airline, she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast space, but a recommitment to the values that founded it. When I started this company with my grandmother's inheritance, I believed that aviation could be both excellent and inclusive. Recent events tested that belief, but ultimately proved its strength. The audience, representing every department and level of the company, listened intently. Many had been personally affected by Richard's discriminatory policies. Others had stood courageously against them, risking their livelihoods. The federal investigations into Richard Harrington and his accomplices continue, Zara acknowledged. Bradley Wilson and several other senior staff face serious charges related to civil rights violations and safety negligence. But today isn't about looking backward. It's about the future we're building together. That future had taken shape remarkably quickly. With Richard and his allies removed, the board had been reconstituted with members committed to Horizon's core values. Bradley Wilson had faced a disciplinary hearing where he personally confronted passengers he had mistreated, including Elaine Whitfield, who had tearfully apologized for her role in Zara's humiliation once the full story emerged. Most significantly, Zara had finally revealed herself publicly as the founder and majority owner of Horizon Airways. The media had been fascinated by her story. The brilliant young engineer who had built a billion-dollar company while deliberately maintaining a low profile to monitor service quality firsthand. Moving forward, our commitment to equity and accountability takes concrete form. Zara continued unveiling new corporate policies. Every executive will regularly experience our airline as passengers do, traveling incognito on routes throughout our network. Every complaint will receive proper investigation, regardless of who files it, and our safety standards will be the highest in the industry for every route we serve without exception. Thomas Reynolds, now recovered from his injuries, had assumed a new role leading a reformed security department with emphasis on passenger dignity and employee protection. Carmen had been promoted to head of operations with explicit authority to ensure safety consistency across all routes. Darius led new technology initiatives designed to enhance customer experience equitably for all passengers. Perhaps most satisfying was Aisha's appointment as General Counsel with a focus on corporate ethics, while Maya had joined a newly formed advisory board on inclusion. The alliance that had formed to save Horizon Airways had evolved into a permanent part of its structure. Today, we also launched 2 initiatives particularly close to my heart, Zara announced. First, the Gloria Johnson Scholarship Program, named for my grandmother, will provide aviation career pathways for students from underrepresented communities. Second, our new Aviation Academy will train the next generation of pilots, engineers, and executives with emphasis on building the diverse industry leadership of tomorrow. The crowd's applause reflected genuine enthusiasm rather than corporate obligation. Many employees had shared their own experiences of discrimination during the internal review process, creating a collective catharsis that strengthened their commitment to the renewed company culture. As the formal presentation concluded, Zara walked through the assembled employees, greeting many by name, listening to their suggestions and concerns. This direct connection with people at every level remained her most powerful leadership tool, one Richard had never understood or valued. Later that afternoon, Zara found herself once again boarding a Horizon Airways flight as a regular passenger. Though many employees now recognized her, she still occasionally traveled incognito to experience the airline service firsthand. Settling into a first-class seat, she smiled as a new flight attendant welcomed her aboard professionally without a flicker of recognition. "First time flying with us?" the young woman asked pleasantly. "No," Zara replied. "I've been with Horizon since the beginning." The flight attendant nodded politely, continuing her preparations without understanding the literal truth of Zara's statement. That anonymity still felt valuable sometimes, a way to ensure the company's values were being lived, not just proclaimed. As the aircraft taxied toward the runway, Zara glanced at the small photo frame she now carried in her bag. Her grandmother's image had been professionally restored. The damage from that fateful day erased, though Zara would never forget it. The frame now sat prominently on her office desk, but traveled with her on important journeys as a reminder of where she had started and why her work mattered. The plane accelerated down the runway, lifting smoothly into the afternoon sky. Through the window, Zara watched the city recede below, buildings and streets becoming miniature versions of themselves. From this height, individual differences disappeared, revealing the connected whole. That perspective, seeing both the specific details and the larger pattern, had guided her from the beginning. It had helped her recognize what Richard was doing before it was too late. It would continue guiding Horizon Airways into a future where everyone belonged. Everyone was valued, and everyone could fly as high as their dreams would take them. As the aircraft leveled at cruising altitude, Zara closed her eyes briefly, hearing her grandmother's voice in memory. Fly higher than they say you can. The words that had inspired a young woman to build an airline now inspired an industry to become more just, more inclusive, more reflective of the diverse world it served. Sky-high justice indeed. Sky-high justice teaches us that fighting discrimination requires more than individual courage. It demands systematic vigilance and collective action. Zara's story reminds us that prejudice often hides behind corporate policies dressed in the language of customer comfort or traditional values. The lesson isn't just about one black woman defending her rightful seat on a plane, but about recognizing how discrimination becomes institutionalized when not actively countered. We learned that true leadership means experiencing your organization at every level, seeing problems firsthand rather than remaining isolated in executive suites. Zara's practice of traveling incognito allowed her to understand her company's reality, not just its reports and metrics. The story demonstrates the power of allies and coalition building. Zara succeeded not because she fought alone, but because she built a diverse team united by shared values. When conventional channels failed, community support became her strongest asset. Perhaps most importantly, we see that justice requires both accountability and structural change. It wasn't enough to remove Richard and his allies. Horizon Airways needed new policies, leadership practices, and cultural commitments to prevent future discrimination. The final lesson is about resilience, not just Zara's personal strength, but the resilience that comes from creating institutions rooted in dignity and respect for all. In the end, Zara's airline flourished, not despite its commitment to inclusion, but because of it. What moment in this story resonated most deeply with you? Was it Zara's humiliation on her own plane, the discovery of systematic discrimination, or perhaps the final triumph of justice? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever witnessed or experienced discrimination and wished you had the courage to stand against it? Drop a like if this story inspired you to consider how you might speak up next time. If you believe in creating spaces where everyone is treated with dignity, regardless of their background, subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that expose injustice and celebrate those who fight against it. Remember, change happens when we recognize discrimination and take action, even when it's difficult. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and may you find the courage to create your own sky-high justice when facing inequality in your life.